You know, people talk about worship a lot, but this morning I wanted to talk to you about the why of worship. Why worship? Why do we worship? Why does God right now in heaven have his throne surrounded with nonstop worship? It literally says there are 10,000 times 10,000 around his throne right now worshiping. Why? Why here on earth, when we get together in our meetings, in our Sunday mornings, in our churches, why do we worship? Why? This morning I want to explore with you the why of worship. And I'm going to start with a story, just a testimony. Recently I was on a flight from Washington, D.C. back here to Austin, Texas. And I'm just sitting there minding my own business. And it was kind of funny because of what we do with worship and missions around the world. Sometimes my airline will bump me up to business class. And I always think that's kind of funny because I'm not the most business class looking guy, you know, and I always sit next to these real important looking people. And I love Jesus too, right? So like on these planes, a lot of times the love of God will find me and I'll just be sitting there weeping, just looking like a weeping, crying, weird guy sitting in business class. And this was one of those times. And so I'm sitting there on this flight coming back home to Austin, minding my own business, and all of a sudden the love of God just begins to hunt me down. And the way I describe it is his love hunted me down and just found me at 30,000 feet on the plane. And he encountered me, and little by little, just wave after, it was like waves of his love just begin to crash upon my heart. And as his love began to encounter me, I'm coming underneath the weight of his love over and over. And I just start, weeping. And, there's sometimes when you're weeping, it's like you can hide it a little bit, just, just a little something. But it got to the point where I am losing it. And I am full-blown ugly crying, just losing it. There's just junk coming out, And it was such a scene that the guy sitting next to me, the important business guy, he's like, oh, my goodness, what's going on with this guy? And, the flight attendant came over, Mr. Pino, sir, are you okay? And I couldn't even talk. I just gave her a thumbs. All I could do was just giving her a thumbs up, and like head nodding yes. I'm really good. And it was so funny. I'm sitting there just in having this encounter with the love of God. And I find myself able to get out one sentence. And the one sentence was, Jesus, your love is so amazing. And I'm just sitting there, his love is crashing over my heart, wave after wave. And the only thing I can do, the only thing I can say, I'm just looking out the window, saying, Jesus, your love is so amazing. Your love is so amazing, Jesus. And as I'm having this encounter, all of a sudden I go into this vision. And in this vision, it's like the plane disappears and the sky disappears. And in the vision, I find myself in the throne room of heaven, and it's kind of like a dream, like in a dream, you just have a knowing sometimes, And so I knew that I was in the throne room of heaven. I'm on my knees in this vision, and I'm just rocking, just kind of holding my heart, weeping, just saying, Jesus, your love is so amazing. Jesus, your love is so amazing. And as I open my eyes in this vision, to my surprise, Jesus is kneeling there right next to me, and he's kind of rocking, and he's holding his heart, and Jesus is doing the ugly cry face. And I'm like, Jesus, what? Because I had never seen him like that. When you picture Jesus, you picture like his majesty, his beauty, his worth, like all of this majestic. And here I am in this moment, and Jesus looks just broken, and he's having some kind of encounter. And I am sitting there, and as my brain is trying to wrap around what in the world is going on right now, Jesus looks at me through those tears, and he looks at me and he says something to me that has forever changed my life, the perspective of how I live. It's changed my worship. It's changed my family dynamic. It's changed everything. Jesus looks at me and he's weeping, it looks a very similar encounter to what I'm having. And Jesus looks at me, he says, Rick, your love is so amazing. Your love is so amazing. And he says, I wanted you to see what your love does to me. And it was in that moment that I understood, friends, it's one thing for the love of God to touch humanity. And that's awesome. And we love him because he first loved us. It's one thing for the love of God to touch humanity, but it's a completely different reality when we understand what the love of humanity does when it touches God. God in his humility has humbled himself to the point where he says, I am going to open myself up to receive your love. I want to feel your love. I want to hear your voice. This is all I want. I just want to be with you. And friends, it was in that encounter on the airplane that I began to realize this isn't just about us getting touched with the love of God. That's awesome. But I think a lot of times we come to our gatherings and we do our events and we come with the awesome expectation, Jesus, I want your love to touch me. And that's good. But we need to lift our vision higher and begin to understand our love can touch and move and ravish the heart of God. Did you know that Song of Solomon says that with one glance of our eye, he is ravished? Have you ever felt ravished? I mean, when I look at my wife, my heart is ravished. It feels like it's being torn apart into a million pieces, but it's being torn by love, so it's like really amazing. Or when I had laid eyes on my children for the first time, or every day that I get to see them and hold them and love, my heart is ravished. It's an indescribable feeling of an immeasurable love. And friends, when imperfect humanity looks at God with our love, and yes, we blow it sometimes, but guess what? Even weak love is real love, isn't it? When we give him our love and say, God, I give you my love, that glance moves and ravishes his heart. Friends, what happens when we position ourselves, even in seasons like this here at Heart of David, where we consecrate seasons of our life to say, Father, I'm not just going to give you a glance, I'm going to consecrate myself to gaze upon you. If a glance ravishes his heart, what happens when we begin to gaze upon him? This is what it's all about, guys. It's about the heart of God being ravished by the imperfect, yet highly desirable to God, love of humanity. This is why we're here. This is why we live. This is why we breathe, because God desires fellowship. He doesn't just want relationship with you. He wants fellowship with you. Everybody's going for relationship, but I want fellowship. You know, Jesus was sitting around the table and all the disciples are sitting around. 11 of them were close enough to hear his words, but only one of them, John the beloved, got close enough to hear his heart. I want to be Rick the beloved. I want to be that beloved that says, Jesus, I don't want to just hear your words. I want to come in close enough that I can lay my head upon your heart and listen to your heartbeat. Friends, this is what it's all about. So worship is about the love of humanity touching God and God's love touching humanity. But I think we've approached it from his love touching us only, we need to understand our love can move and ravish the heart of Jesus. You know, everybody wants Jesus to answer his or her prayers. But who's answering Jesus' prayer? Did you remember that Jesus had a prayer? Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus lets us peer into his heart desire. Matthew chapter 6, verse 10, Jesus prays this unusual and amazing prayer. He says, Father, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And for some reason, we always breeze over this part like it's not a big deal. But guys, this verse is a big deal. It's a big deal to Jesus. It's in this verse that we see a glimpse into his intentions for humanity. He says, Father, I want to bring heaven and earth together. And friends, we need to rise up as lovers, as worshipers who say, Jesus, you've answered my prayers. Now I want to live my life in such a way that I get to answer your prayer. I want to bring heaven and earth together. And friends, the way that we do that is to worship Jesus on earth as they do in heaven. Did you know in heaven right now, there's no need to pray for the sick? That's good. We need to do that now. But in eternity, we're not going to be preaching to the lost. That's good. We need to do that now. In eternity, we're not going to be, laying hands on the sick so they'll recover. That's good. We need to do that now. But in eternity, we're not going to have need of any of that stuff. In eternity, we're not going to be known as apostles and prophets. We are going to be known as lovers and worshipers of God. So friend, let's get used to it now. Why wait till you die to step in to your destiny? Let's not wait till then. Let's do this now. We need to get back to the place of valuing spending long hours in the presence of God, because Jesus wants his prayers answered. He wants heaven and earth to come together. Friends, when we worship in this room, it becomes a throne room. They synchronize together. Heaven and earth come together when we begin to do on earth as it is in heaven. Did you know in heaven right now, many times I have people come to me and go, Rick, you guys are radical, man, like hosting these nonstop worship events. It's crazy. Like, isn't that a little radical? I mean, 50 hours nonstop worship, you're doing it all over the nation, all over the world. Isn't that a little extreme? And I just kind of laugh at them. I say, radical, extreme? We're not even normal yet. Heaven never stops. The song in heaven never ends. We've not even become normal yet. Don't even talk to me about radical. Go ask one of the four living creatures if this is radical or excessive to exalt Jesus day and night. I wonder what they would tell you. Hey, could you imagine going up to one of them? Hey, is this really necessary? I mean, isn't this a little radical? You guys are just sitting here all day, all night. No, come on. It's not radical, friends. This is normal. The reason why God is breathing on worship right now all over the globe is not because worship is the new cool thing. Worship is the main attraction of all of eternity. This is our eternal priestly job, guys. This forever, we will gaze upon him. We will sing about his beauty. We will declare his attributes. Friends, when we worship, God begins to find a witness in the earth. Heaven and earth come together, and he finds a witness in the earth, and he's able to release the resources that he has there, and he can release them here. Did you know that when the church in heaven worships, we see in Revelation chapter 4 and 5, that when the church in heaven worships, God releases his government, his kingdom, his resources. Friends, if the church in heaven worships and God releases himself in heaven, guess what? When the church of earth worships, God releases himself into the earth. When we begin to worship, we begin to answer the prayers of Jesus. The heavenly worship order that we see in Revelation chapter 4 and 5 is continual, musical, relational, God-centered worship that focuses on his beauty, his personality, and his actions. Why do we worship, friends? We worship because God is madly in love with humanity. Do you know he's crazy about you? We're going to take a moment here and we're going to peer into, it's almost like God has opened up a crack of the door of his heart and he wants us to peer in. Let's go to Psalm 22. In Psalm 22:3, again, this is like a verse that a lot of times we just breeze over and we just don't think much about it because maybe you heard it 1,000 times growing up in church. But I want to encourage us. Let's park here for a moment. Let's unpack this verse because I believe through this verse, we get to look into God's heart of indescribable love and obsession with humanity. Now, of course, the whole Bible is one big love story, right? But I believe that this verse, it lets us peer in a little bit deeper to what God intends for us. Let's look at it. Psalm 22:3. Psalm 22:3 says, "But Lord, you are holy. You are enthroned in the praises of your people." He's enthroned in the praises of his people. Guys, the throne of God is the center of the universe. This is not a light thing where God goes, oh yeah, I just put my throne in their praises. His throne is the center of the universe. This is the governing, ruling place of where Jesus, he rules and he reigns from. And he says, I want the center of the universe to be close enough that I can hear their prayers, hear their songs, that I can feel their love because I'm madly in love with my people. You know, he didn't put his throne out there on Jupiter somewhere or on some distant star or in some distant galaxy or in some crazy dimension that we don't even know about. He could have easily done that. The majesty, it's like Psalm 8 says, when I consider the heavens, the works of your fingers, the sun and the stars that you've ordained, who is man that you are even mindful of him? Like David's getting his mind blown. Oh my gosh, you could have put your throne anywhere. Like, look how incredible your creation is. It's literally incomprehensible what you have created. And you don't want your throne anywhere else but in the midst of imperfect peoples, imperfect songs, and imperfect prayers, because he would rather be close to you than anywhere else in the entire created order. Because he's madly in love with you. He's madly in love with me. To me, this is it's a look into the heart of God where he says, I am obsessed with you. I want to be close to you. I love the message, what the message says in Psalm 22:3. So poetic and so beautiful. It says, he leans back on the cushion of his people's praises. Friends, when we worship, we are literally creating a resting place for the presence of God to come and feel as comfortable here as he does there in heaven. That's what this is all about, guys. It's not about a goosebump. It's not about, a set list on a Sunday morning, 2 fast and 3 slow. It's not about, well, I just don't feel like it. I'm not really a worshiper. It's not about any of that stuff. It's not about you and it's not about me. It's about King Jesus finding a resting place where his presence can come and abide somewhere. He's looking for cities, regions, and nations that are giving themselves to Jesus' prayer. Father, let your kingdom come, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The eyes of the Lord are seeking those hearts. John chapter 4 says that the Father is seeking worshipers. Again, it's another verse that we breeze over because we've heard it 1,000 times. But Jesus told us a secret about the Father. The Father is looking for something. The Father is seeking. He's looking for worshipers. The Father desires. Did you know that worshipers, they're like magnets to the heart and the presence of God? It's not about being a worship leader, a singer, a songwriter, a musician. It's about Jesus being invited to take that place upon the throne of our heart's affections. That's what worship is. It's so much greater than music or expression. It's about Jesus being enthroned upon our hearts, upon our praises, upon our affections. The Father just wants to be with his people. That's just the bottom line. Let's go to Psalm 132. In Psalm 132, we're going to see an amazing reality of what happens when a man or a woman gives their life to seeing the presence of the Lord established in a city, in a nation, in a region. In Psalm 132, scholars believe that Solomon is dedicating the temple, and he prays an unusual prayer, pleading to God. And it's amazing. He says this, Lord, remember David. What a prayer. He says, okay, how can I pull on the heart of God the strongest right now? I know what I'll do. I'll bring up my father David. And here's why. He says, Lord, remember David in all of his afflictions. Now, these weren't earthly afflictions like how he beat himself or anything. These were the affliction of the soul. This is saying David was so madly in love with God that he positioned his life, what would have appeared in the natural, to be inconvenienced. The Bible says that 7 times a day, David would stop and worship the Lord. I mean, could you imagine? David wasn't just some random guy or just some random priest who all he had to do all day long, the only responsibility was to worship. He was the leader of a nation. He was a governmental power. He was a businessman. He was a musician. He was a father. He was a king. He was all these different things. And could you imagine in the middle of a board meeting, the alarm goes off, so to say. And David goes, oh, guys, I know that we are talking about possibly invading these 3 other nations, but I need to pause because I want to see the presence of the Lord have a resting place here in the nation. So excuse me while I get my praise on. That's what it was like. Could you imagine? Maybe one of the watches of the 7 times a day was in the middle of the night. God, I love you so much that in the middle of the night, I'll have my scribe come up and, hey, David, it's the 7th watch of the day. And maybe David just pops up for 3 minutes and just says, Lord, you're worthy. I love you. I love you more than sleep. You're amazing. I give you my life. It's not this big worship explosion necessarily. It's just the intention to live in a way that would maybe seem like an inconvenience to the natural, but it was a heart that cried out to God that said, no matter what, I want your comfort, your rest to be above my comfort or my rest. That's what the afflictions of David were. It says, Lord, remember David, all of his afflictions, how he swore to the Lord, how he vowed to the mighty one of Jacob, surely I will not go into the chamber of my house. I will not go up to the slumber of my bed until I find a resting place. He was saying, I want your presence to rest. Friends, God is looking to remember David today, but not just David the man. God is looking for David the generation. He's looking for men and women who say, God, I will live my life in such a way that your presence finds rest on my life. I want your presence to feel so comfortable, like the message said. I want you to be able to lean back on the cushion of my praise. I want you to know that in a culture where everybody is obsessed about their rest and their comfort, that God, your rest and your comfort takes first priority in my life. God is looking for a Psalm 132 generation to arise to answer the prayer of Jesus. He's looking for this Davidic generation to arise who will give themselves until they see heaven and earth come together in the worship and the exaltation of the Most High. You know, we worship because of two main reasons. The first one is the given. And I think there's been a lot of talk about this, so I'll just be brief about it. But we worship because God is infinitely worth all of the love and all of the affection of every tribe, tongue, nation, language of the earth, for history past, for current day present, and for all generations to come. He's infinitely worthy of it all and more. Friends, if we could give him 25/8, he would be infinitely worth even more. We worship God because the Lamb is worthy to receive his reward. You know what the reward of the Lamb is? It's the love, the willing love of every tribe, tongue, nation of the earth. It's laid down lovers. It's men and women who say, we want you to find a resting place upon our praises, upon our love, upon our affection. We worship because God is worthy. That's the first reason. The second reason why we worship, and this is the one I want to park on for a little bit longer and kind of unpack it a little bit. We worship because worship is a way that God has provided for humanity to come into agreement with him. We worship because God has provided a way for humanity to come into agreement with him. When we worship, our words come into agreement with God's words. Our heart posture comes into agreement with God's heart posture. When we worship, our perspective comes into agreement with God's perspective. Come on, guys. When we worship, our world comes into agreement with God's world. When we worship, the Father who is seeking worshipers finds a witness in the earth. And it's almost like the Father looks over at the Son and the Holy Spirit. He goes, hey guys, check it out. That place feels and looks exactly like it feels and looks here. Let's take all of the resources that we have here and because there's a witness in the earth, because there's agreement there, let's release all of this stuff there because it's exactly in agreement with here. That's what agreement in worship is all about. It's about God finding a witness, God finding a resting place, God finding that Davidic generation who will give themselves, who will live their lives to see Jesus' prayer answered so that he can say, you guys are doing the prayer of my son. You found favor in my sight. Now I'm going to release all the blessing that I have here. I'm going to release it there. And friends, I'm not just talking about places or churches or conferences or meetings. I'm talking about in your car, in the shower, at the gas station, at the grocery store. You want to see the throne of God come to earth? You simply just go, Jesus, you're amazing. You're worthy. I love you right here in Walmart, right here in the chip aisle at Target, God. Right there, when you do that, that place becomes the throne room of heaven. And the amazing thing, when you worship, you literally pull the throne of heaven into the earth. And Jesus becomes enthroned in that place. And when the throne of God is in the midst of a situation or a place or a person's heart, guess what? The king doesn't just come by himself. The king brings the kingdom with him. When the king comes, he brings his kingdom with him. He brings revelation, prosperity, healing, deliverance, miracles, salvation, love, humility. He brings it all with him. Whatever impossible situation you're going through right now, whatever tough situation you're going through right now, just exalt Jesus over it and watch. Psalm chapter 2 says that the king dashes the nations to pieces with an iron scepter. You want to see the hardness in your life being broken up? Just worship over it. Just sing over it. Just exalt Jesus over it. And he takes his scepter and he dashes the hardness to pieces. Jesus is looking for a witness, for agreement in the earth. And when we worship, he finds that agreement. He finds that witness. That's his prayer. Come on, have you ever thought about that before? Jesus, you've answered all my prayers. I want to answer. I want to become the answer to your prayer. Come on. That's why we're here. That's why we live. We worship because God is infinitely worthy, and we worship because it brings us into agreement with who God is, who he said he was. It brings us into agreement with what he said he would do. Did you know the Bible says one of us puts 1,000 to flight, but two of us puts how many to flight? 10,000. So when there's agreement between two people, it increases the anointing by 10,000 fold. But friends, that's just talking about agreement between two people. What happens when we come into agreement with God? All things become possible, right? Let's go to Revelation chapter 21. I'm going to end with this thought. Revelation chapter 21, verse 3. You know, the way to understand the intention of Jesus with why he has set up worship the way he has set it up. You know, he's not up there just having a bad day, just going, I just wish somebody would just worship me. Oh, my day is so hard. I just wish somebody would worship me. It doesn't, and we just go, you know, Lord, I love you, Lord. I hope you feel better today, Lord. You know, that's not the purpose of worship. It's God's fine. He set it up so that he can have a witness to come into agreement with him, so he could answer the prayer of his son and release his resources into that place or that person or that city or that region or that nation. Friends, I'm telling you, this worship DNA is going to go so viral inside of us Right now, it's happening all over the globe. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation. It's happening in Australia right now. It's happening in India right now. It's happening in the Middle East. It's happening in Ecuador. It's happening in the U.S. It's happening all over the globe. The global crescendo of worship is arising. The global canopy of praise is arising. And when we sign up for what I'm talking about today, we become a tent peg in that global canopy. And we say, Father, here, right now, with us, we want to sign up for your dream to come true. We want to see Jesus have a resting place. We want to see that reality explode in our lives, in our homes, in our families, in our city. We want to see you enthroned right here. And this global crescendo of worship, the love song, is getting louder and stronger and more passionate. I believe it's just going to drive the Lord crazy in a good way. He's going to continue to hear our song, and the song is going to get so amazing that one day he's just going to stand up and go, Father, I can't take it anymore. Listen to the song. Listen, I feel their love. I hear their song. I can feel their prayers. They're reciprocating the love back to me that I gave to them. They're answering my prayer. And the Father's going to go, that's right, son. It's time for you to return. And we're literally going to sing back the King. We're going to sing him back to the earth. Now, I love it. Revelation 21:3, sometimes you have to go to the end to see the intentions of what are introduced in the beginning, right? So at the end of the book, Revelation 21:3, we see this. It says, I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, God's home. I'm reading from the NLT. I just love this translation. I heard a shout from the throne saying, look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. This is God's intention. He wants a home with his people. He wants a resting place in the earth. He wants to lean back on the cushion of our praises. He is so in love with us. He just wants to hear our voice. He just wants to feel our love. He just wants to have a witness in the earth. The Father is seeking worshipers who are going to answer the prayer of Jesus. He's seeking us. He's seeking you. He's seeking me. Friends, we are going to see the city of Austin raised up as a city set upon a hill. We're going to see this city raised up as a burning, shining lamp. I'm telling you, we're going to see the live music capital become the live worship capital. How many of you want to stand before Jesus on your last day, and we're going to stand together, and we're going to hand him the city of Austin? We're going to say, Jesus, you died for this city. Your blood was enough. Don't wait till you die to step into your eternal destiny. Let's enter into it now. Let's enter into it today. Let's all stand.